Hello everyone and welcome back to Brink of Speed. My name is Mike and I want to personally thank you for hitting that play button. Today's video is titled Why GM Built the Chevrolet Corvette Z06 and Do You Even Need a ZR1? I wanted to bring you a normal vlog today about my car, but it's been raining non-stop here in the DFW. So I will tell you though, I have something super exciting happening this Saturday, and we'll bring that video content to you on Monday. So make sure and stay tuned for that video. By the way, if you are new to this channel, we would love to have you become a part of the Brink of Speed community. And so make sure and hit that red subscribe button and the little bell notification next to it. And that will notify you when my new content comes out. Today's video is something that I have been thinking about a lot lately. And being that I have a decent amount of Corvette experience and knowledge, I wanted to talk to you about my opinion on this matter. I hear this statement from people on YouTube, and friends of mine have said this to me also. So first we're going to answer the question, why GM built the Corvette Z06, and then we will talk about if you even need to buy a ZR1 or just stick with the Z06. Just so everyone knows, this vlog will show facts about both cars, and then I will give my opinion on this matter. So let's go ahead and get started. The first Z06 was offered in 1963 with the split window C2 Corvette, which obviously you guys know is my favorite older generation Corvette. Zora was responsible for this happening, and the reason he wanted to make this Z06 package available was because there was a few people who wanted to take their Corvettes racing. So he made the Corvette race ready with this Z06 package. Checking the Z06 box in the Corvette's order sheet added a thicker 20mm front stabilizer bar, larger diameter shock absorbers, and springs that were twice as stiff as the standard springs. It also featured upgraded brakes with a dual-circuit master cylinder and a vacuum brake booster to enhance safety and reduce braking effort. As you can see, Zora made this car race-ready. The next Z06 that GM made was the C5 Z06 in 2001. This car actually was meant to be a bare-bones, very inexpensive version of the C5. GM was concerned about whether or not the Corvette was going to sell well. And they're talking about the C5 here. So they designed this bare-bones version with cloth seats, hand crank windows, and zero creature comforts. However, what happened is the C5 ended up selling like hotcakes. In fact, GM couldn't even keep up with the demand for this car. So what they decided next was amazing. They still made this car a super light version of the C5 and gave it a new LS6 5.7 liter engine with 385 horsepower. This car also came with stiffer springs, larger brakes, larger wheels, a lighter frame, titanium exhaust, and tighter steering. GM produced, in my opinion, their most impressive Corvette yet. I still remember getting so excited reading about this car, especially when all the car magazines were saying that this car was a street legal race car. And I totally remember, reading Motor Trend or Car and Driver, one of those magazines, and they sat there and talked about how basically GM had made a race car that you were allowed to drive on the road, and it just made me super excited. When this car came out, I never thought I would ever be able to own one. But 4 years later, I was the proud owner of a 2003 50th anniversary Corvette Z06, and it only had 1,200 miles on it. This car truly was a race car, and it handled better than any car I'd ever driven. Plus, it truly made me feel like I was getting into an exotic supercar every time I drove it, and that was exciting. Besides the fact that I've had the pleasure of owning 3 out of the 4 generations of Z06s built by GM, All this experience behind the wheels of the C5, the C6, and now the C7 Z06, I have come to the conclusion that for the money, this is the best bang for your buck supercar ever built. And as you guys have seen in my past videos of my C7 Z06, I've already told you that, having driven my C5 on the track, I never got to drive my C6 on a road course, but I could tell just by driving it around, corners really fast around town and things, that it handled phenomenally. But after owning now this C7 Z06, it's just unbelievable how well it corners, and I have taken it to the track, and it performs beyond anyone's imaginations. It's just phenomenal on the track. Now, let's go ahead and get into the ZR1. This car was introduced in 1969 as a 1970 C3 Stingray ZR1. This car was actually built behind the scenes, though, and this car was extremely bare bones, kind of like the one that we talked about with the Z06, where they had hand crank, windows, things like that. This one was even more bare bones, though. On top of having zero power anything, this car didn't even have air conditioning, and it didn't have a radio. And it was a super rare car, and they only built 53 of these ZR1s. Next came the C4 ZR1 from 1990 to 95. This was an amazing machine and truly competed with the best supercars in the world. There wasn't a Z06 made, however, for the 4th generation Corvette, so the ZR1 had no competition inside GM's lineup. The next ZR1 to come from GM wasn't until the 6th generation, and they gave this car 133 more horsepower than the C6 Z06. However, if you owned a Z06 with the Z07 package on it, this ZR1 was basically just a horsepower increase, and they added some carbon fiber and aero upgrades as well. The Z06, however, was a couple 100 pounds lighter than the ZR1, so it still had almost the same track times as the new ZR1. So, just so you know, horsepower isn't everything. A lot of people out there think, as long as this car has more power, then I can do better track times. That is completely incorrect, unless you're dealing with the same handling capabilities with more horsepower and then a professional driver. Then you're going to get faster track times, but the faster track times don't usually come from having a lot more horsepower. They come from better handling. So if it were up to me on my car, I would choose to have better handling than more horsepower any day of the week. That C6 ZR1 was a phenomenal car. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to make it sound like it was not that much better than the Z06. But I just wanted to make the point that if you got the best package on the Z06, which was the Z07 package, it was barely faster. It was only faster by like a second around most courses than that Z06. So anyway, let's move on to the C7 ZR1. This car wasn't even in GM's plans. They actually had created the greatest handling and most powerful Corvette of all time with the new C7 Z06. So GM's engineers and pretty much everybody else at GM thought there's no way they could top that. And I totally understand why they thought that. When the C7 Z06 was announced, I actually told a few of my friends that I highly doubted that they were going to come out with a ZR1 because they had given the Z06 150 or really 145 more horsepower than the last Z06 out there. And I just felt like after seeing the numbers from the skid pad and the track times and things that this Z06 was doing, I didn't think that GM could come up with a ZR1 that could really top that. And GM also stated at the time the Z06 came out that it was their top dog. They ultimately put their heads together, though, and figured out a way to do it. They figured out a way to improve on the Z06. And what they came up with, in my opinion, is spectacular. The result was 155 more horsepower, 65 foot-pounds more of torque, a wider body and stance, more downforce, and they completely upgraded the supercharger from a 1.7 liter to a 2.3 liter supercharger. They also upgraded the cooling big time, which was really needed because of the overheating issues that the Z06 was having out there on the track. This car was far superior in every way. Or was it? The answer is yes. But my question was, do you even need a ZR1? And I have a good reason for asking that. As you have seen in some of my previous videos, I analyze whether someone needs a Z06 over a Grand Sport. This is, in my opinion, somewhat similar, but there are some key differences also. From the time the Z06 was built, GM did an excellent job of making this car perform at the highest levels it could, and definitely hit a home run with the Z06 every generation. It is always going to be very difficult to improve on with a ZR1, but I say people buy the ZR1 for a different reason than the Z06. The ZR1 is a rare car and has always been the king of Corvettes since it came out. Most people that buy this car are never planning on taking it to the track, even though it is the most track-capable Corvette ever built. They want it because of its rareness and what it represents. They buy the ZR1 to make a statement and to probably keep it a long time. These cars hold their value better than any Z06 has, so it makes sense for them to hang on to it for a while. Now, is this car worth the extra cash even if money isn't an issue? I would ask yourself one question before you decide to buy the ZR1. Am I going to track this car? If the answer is yes, you need to know that unless you are an amazing, advanced, or pro race driver, you will never be able to push this car anywhere near its limits. And it will probably scare you on the track, and you should probably either get a Z06 or a Grand Sport if you're planning on doing a lot of racing. As I've stated in previous videos, if you are an advanced or pro driver, disregard everything I'm saying because you can handle any car out there just fine and not have any issues. But if you're just someone that likes to go to the track 3 or 4 times a year and, drive their amazing Corvette around the track, you really should probably settle for a Grand Sport. But if you can't settle for that, spend a little more money, get a Z06, and have a ball with that. You don't need to spend $30,000 or $40,000 more for a ZR1 because the ZR1 will probably scare you. If your answer was no, then I would say go for it because you will have a blast with this car and it will hold its value well, especially if you can say that you never took it to a track. Believe it or not, folks, people care about these things. If you ever want to get the most money out of your car while being honest with whoever you're selling it to, if you tell them that you tracked your car, they're likely to give you less for it than if you told them that you never took it to the track. Moving on, though, the real answer to this question is no one needs a ZR1. But why the heck wouldn't you buy one if you can afford it? Besides the track reason I gave, if you can afford a ZR1, I think it would be crazy not to buy one. However, in wrapping this up, the only other thing that I would say is if you like all supercars, not just Corvettes, and can afford, anywhere from $140,000, $150,000 or more, there might be something out there that you would enjoy even more than a ZR1 for that price. Now, you would have to buy something used, of course, to be in that price range with a lot of the other supercars. But, I have no problem with used supercars. And let's face it, let's let someone else take that huge, giant depreciation hit before you buy that car. I hope every one of you enjoyed this upload. So if you did, leave me a comment below letting me know what you thought about it. Also, make sure and hit that thumbs up button, and then make sure and hit that subscribe and bell button so that you're notified when my new content comes out. Other than that, have a wonderful rest of your weekend, and I'll see you guys out on the road.